So good morning and welcome to our second event of Smart Meter Awareness Week. I'm Fleer Lawton, I'm Head of Public Affairs for Smart Energy GB, and we're the National Consumer Campaign for the Smart Meter rollout. This morning, we're going to be discussing smart meters and the perspective for letting agents. And I've got a great panel here with me to talk about it. We've got property expert Kate Faulkner, Sean Hooker, Head of Redress from Property Redress Scheme, Daryl McIntosh, Policy Manager from Propertymark, and Colin Griffiths, Policy Manager at Citizens Advice. This morning, we'll be talking about the benefits of smart meters for the private rented sector, and this session is specifically all about letting agents. Our goal is to help you to advise landlords and tenants about why upgrading their energy meters is the right choice. There's a load of expertise on the panel with me, so please put your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can today. So to start with, I'd just like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about sort of what they're doing at the minute as well. And can I start with Kate, who's a property expert and owner of Design on Property?
Well, that's pretty much my introduction, so thank you for that. So hopefully most people know who I am, but always wear an independent hat, and I like letting agents and I like landlords and I also like tenants. So for me, and for those of you that are out there that are good letting agents, which is why you're on this call, because I can't imagine the rogues would be bothered, I think smart meters are just a really easy, not just win-win, but a win-win-win. And the reason being is we all know that tenants are going to have one of the trickiest financial times over the next 12 months. And that's after an extraordinary tricky time for some of them who have been dealt financial blows through COVID. On top of that, we've got, I think, inflation's 3% heading up to 4%. But more importantly, I don't know about you, but my utility bills are racketing up on my smart meter on a daily basis. But at least I know, because I've got a smart meter, that how much I have to budget for. And I think we all think that everybody out there, you know, watches the business news or the news every single day. There's a lot of people don't, and they won't have any idea that gas prices are going up until they get the shock of the bill coming through at the end of the month. What you don't want is for your tenant to not be able to afford the rent at the end of that period because they hadn't accounted for the higher cost of bills. So that's a good reason for them to have a smart meter. The other one is landlords. You will have some of your landlords that will be paying for the bills, and this can be a tremendous help to them, which I'm sure will be gone through a little later. But more important, you can make your own life easier as well, because it can help you with regards to those awful meter readings where you have to climb under the stairs or wherever it may be and meet spiders and all sorts of stuff to try and get that meter reading. That all disappears. Even if you just use that reason, great reason to have a smart meter. And the final one, you know, I like PR. I think this is a really great opportunity for a lovely local piece of PR. And I don't know if it's possible. There's loads of things that Smart Energy are providing, but it'd be lovely. They could probably provide you with a little press release. You could put out and say, we support net zero, we support going green, and we're writing out to all of our tenants and landlords to recommend a simple first step, which is taking a smart meter. So that's where I'm coming from, and I really hope we can get that message across today.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kate. And to any of you out there who are interested in that PR side, please just pop your details in the chat, and one of the team will get back to you as well around that. Sean, if I can turn to you next for a few words.
Yeah, certainly, Fleer. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, so when you guys approached us many months ago now, and said, "Oh, well, how many complaints does the Property Redress Scheme get on smart meter issues?" We looked at our database, and to be fair, we didn't actually find any direct complaints against letting agents relating to smart meters. Well, that got me thinking. I'm thinking, well, actually, no, this is quite an important issue. So what's behind all of this? So I had a look at, you know, at our database and the complaints that we've got in there, and you know, we did see other issues that were coming up relating to energy. Quite a lot of issues that were coming up relating to issues of energy and payment and bills and everything else. Everything from you know, some damp and mold because tenants were afraid to put on the heating to help prevent that, to confusion over in HMOs whether who was paying the bill, whether bills were included, and all these issues were subliminally underneath the whole issue of the energy issue and the fuel poverty and the other things that were related to that. And I also, know from experience that there's a lot of unawareness and confusion about issues. So tenants don't necessarily actually even know that a smart meter is an option, and how that can relate to complaints that they get in. And also, it's a fear to ask about whether they wanted to get one installed. It was quite interesting that we've got such a lot of stuff going on at the moment with the government announcing ambitious plans, for MEES and for heat pumps and other stuff there. But what came across my desk the other week was a report from the Fuel Poverty Committee, which is a government committee that sits and they do an annual report on fuel poverty. And one of the things that came out of that was about the number of people that actually were switching. They weren't sure that the tenants were actually switching. Ofgem statistics a few years back said that something like 3/4 of tenants never switched their energy bills, and also that that there was no evidence that say tenants on prepaid meters were actually getting the best rates that they could. And smart meters are all part of a kind of like a pivotal part of that communication and that interaction with a tenant and their energy usage. And that's why I think it's so important that letting agents should be encouraging their landlords to switch over, because it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win because if your tenants are paying energy bills, they're going to have less money to pay rent. They are, they're going to be more aware of their energy consumption and how important it is for things like ventilation, damp and mold. And also, it's something that you could say they're getting more savvy. They're getting more green savvy. They're getting more interested in the environment. Plus, they're working from home a lot now, so their energy bills are actually going to go up. Because your working day, you need an energy, but that's actually your higher rate of electricity and gas bills. So these are all such important points that we're going to cover today, and that's why we're fully supporting this awareness week, and hope that you all will be promoting and encouraging landlords and tenants to look at these options.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, brilliant. We will be covering a lot of those topics today, and you can absolutely come and do my job because you're selling smart meters really well there. So thank you for that. Daryl, if we can turn to you next from Propertymark and tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Flora. Good morning, everybody. I'm Daryl McIntosh, the policy manager for Propertymark. I primarily cover the devolved nations, but working with the policy team on everything throughout the UK as well. It's good to see that this is being rolled out throughout the UK, apart from Northern Ireland. And I'm probably going to echo Sean's comments, albeit in a different accent. It is just the before coming on here, I phoned our legal helpline to see just how many calls that they've been getting around smart meters from agents and dealing with it. I was their first; they'd had none. So it's I don't know whether it's successfully being rolled out or is just there's not a lot of it happening. I would go for the latter, to be honest. Just without any questions, because we get a lot of questions on the legal helpline about anything and everything. So yeah, I think this is a great awareness raising exercise. It can change attitudes, help with any confusion about who's liable, costs, etc. I think the myth busting section that's been made available as well answers a lot of questions, and it's stripped down. It's an easy read. I think this exercise should be good to provide tips for agents to just assure landlords that it's effectively an element of betterment. It's not going to make the property worse. It should not increase the value, but it'll make it look a lot better, a lot more appealing as well, for future tenants and the tenants that are in as well. And I think there's an element of, again, Sean just touched on about people working from home and checking their electric and gas bills. Perhaps there needs to be a little bit of training on how to use the smart meter itself. Some tenants might think it's a good idea to get this little colourful device in, but not actually know what it means, and not actually know that actually the meter doesn't stop it, your electric and gas use. You have to, unplug something and look after and your usage as well. So no, I think this is a great exercise. I think most of it, as I say, we're fully supportive behind it, and we'll try and get the message out as much as we can.
Thank you, Daryl, and lovely to hear accents from across Great Britain today. And full disclosure here, I am a landlord myself, and I have a letting agent looking after a property for me. And certainly the letting agents I've worked with have when I refer to smart meters, they're just kind of like, what? So it is quite interesting, and we know that it is needed, and it's really good to have your support here today as well. Colin, turning to you from Citizens Advice and the sort of consumer angle as well. Welcome to say a few words.
Thank you. Yes, so as you say, I'm Colin Griffiths. I'm from Citizens Advice. I lead on our work on smart metering, in which we are quite involved. Just for additional context for anyone thinking why Citizens Advice is involved in this particularly, it's worth flagging that we have a statutory role within the energy industry specifically. So we have been heavily involved in the smart rollout since its inception, as have I. Our line on smart meters is that they are very good and useful. They address a lot of the problems that we see for consumers. So actually a particularly recent one was during COVID lockdowns. Smart prepay meters allow you to top up remotely from home rather than going into a shop, which previously was a nice convenience, but during a COVID lockdown suddenly becomes a safety matter of I can do this remotely rather than having to go out and about. We also, I think it's 38% of our contacts are about billing issues. Most of those around estimated bills. Smart meters eliminate that because you actually get an accurate bill based on it. You won't be surprised to learn that our priority is the consumer experience and how smart meters work for them. So our position has tended to be one of advocating for consumers. It's also worth flagging we have, in addition to all the local Citizens Advice across the country, we also have our phone number on the back of every energy bill. So people do contact us, particularly about energy matters. So we have specific categories and we look at all of our smart related contacts to see what issues are coming up. And we do hear from the private rented sector a fair bit. We do hear from tenants saying things like, well, can I have one? Is it my job? Is it my landlord's job? Where does this sit? So we are aware that there are challenges in this area, which I am hopeful that events like this help us to address, because that demographic is a little bit behind on getting smart meters and therefore seeing the benefits of them. I guess the final point I'd make quickly, it's been touched on briefly already, is smart meters' role as the kind of gateway to net zero tech. So inevitably, especially this week, we've been hearing a lot about heat pumps. We're going to hear more about time of use tariffs, about micro generations, so solar panels, things like that, charging an EV. Smart meters are going to be increasingly crucial to a lot of those because it's going to come down a lot more to when you're using energy and, charging a battery at the best possible time and then discharging it at the right time. You've got a solar panel, filling it up when it's energy's expensive and then using it when energy's cheap. Benefits like that are going to start coming onto the system in the future as well, which I think is going to make smart meter benefits even more real than they currently are. So at the moment, it's a bit more behavior change led, but I think it's going to start entering the real world a bit more now, and indeed already is doing.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, the future benefits of smart meters they're very open, aren't they? There's loads of stuff coming up at the minute. There's lots of things that we're hearing about, lots of things around behavior change that we do need to start thinking about how we do that, and lots of lessons as well, I think, from the smart meter rollout in terms of how we do that for the future as well. So thank you for all your comments. As you can see, we've got a really good panel here, so please get your questions in. We'll discuss them in a minute, but I'm going to start off by telling you a bit about the benefits of smart meters for the private rented sector and specifically for letting agents as well. So as I mentioned at the start, I'm from Smart Energy GB. We're the national consumer engagement campaign for the smart meter rollout. And it's our job to make sure that people are aware of smart meters and the benefits, so that they can confidently say yes to the offer of having a smart meter from their energy supplier. We're also tasked with encouraging energy behaviour change and supporting consumers in vulnerable circumstances, so including those in fuel poverty, and to help people to use their smart meters to take control of their energy use where they can. So what are smart meters and how do they work? They're basically the next generation of gas and electricity meters. They're digital meters and they're being installed by your energy supplier in homes across Britain at no additional cost. So being digital means that they send your meter readings direct to your energy supplier. So the way that they do that is that they have what's called a communications hub attached to the smart electricity meter. That's the clever bit. That is the smart bit of the meter. It talks directly to your energy supplier, so it tells them how much gas and electricity you use. So that means no more having to take meter readings, as Kate was saying, no more having to climb into a cupboard or get on the steps to get to your meter. It goes directly to them. And that means that you get an accurate bill rather than an estimate. And as Colin mentioned, that is critically important for people, and particularly in terms of budgeting, in terms of the very uncertain times that we've had recently. Having some certainty around what your energy is going to cost is actually really useful to people as well. When you get your smart meter installed, you're also given a small screen. It's called an in-home display. And that little screen shows you as a consumer how much your energy is costing in pounds and pence. So it's very different from the situation that we've had with analog meters, where basically, unless you're very clever and know exactly what a kilowatt hour costs and how that works, you've got no clue about how much your energy is going to cost until the bill drops through the mat. So this makes it visible. It makes your energy use visible. And from that, it means that you can make small changes potentially within your home to sort of understand how you're working, how you're using your energy, when you're using your energy, what uses most energy in your home, and help you to understand that and make changes where you can. It's important to note as well, smart meters can operate in credit or prepayment token mode. As again, Colin mentioned, this has been for prepayment customers, the benefits are very much now, not just those future benefits that we're talking about in terms of future technologies and net zero. For prepayment customers, the benefits are very much now. Whether that is that they don't have to leave the house to top up or they can go online, they can do that over the phone, they don't need to go to the shop, or whether it is also around the suppliers being able to communicate as well. So in cold weather, the potential for cold weather payments, emergency payments and things like that being put onto the meter remotely as well. All of these things are very much now benefits. So for prepayment customers, I think the message is very much get a smart meter. But talking about the net zero side, smart meters are helping to upgrade Britain's energy system. With every smart meter that's installed, energy suppliers and distributors have a better view of sort of near real-time demand on the system. And it helps that system to make the most of renewable energy sources, so things like wind and solar, and reducing waste on that system as well, far better than our analog energy system ever does. In fact, the government are predicting that the smart meter rollout could eventually save about £650 million worth of energy that's wasted within the system. So it's a really important tool from an economic point of view, but also from a carbon saving point of view in getting us to net zero. So as part of Smart Energy GB's work, we do regular, quite extensive research into consumer attitudes towards smart meters. And from that research, we know that 72% of smart meter owners say they've got a better idea of what they're spending on their energy. And 79% say that they understand what they need to do to save energy around the home. And our research also shows us that while people who live in private rented accommodation are more likely to want a smart meter, they are less likely to actually have one installed. That's an important point, and we'll come back to that a bit later in the presentation as well. There are over 25 million smart meters already installed in homes and small businesses in Great Britain. And whilst we have, the rollout has faced challenges in the past, they are now working to overcome those. One of the key areas that we get asked about is around switching energy suppliers. So to be clear, whatever sort of smart meter you've got, you can switch energy supplier. Some of the first generation, sometimes called SMETS1 meters, smart meters that were fitted, couldn't actually speak, they couldn't communicate to different suppliers necessarily. So if you switched supplier from the one that installed your meter, you might find that you lost some of your smartness of your meter, and that it started working as a traditional meter again. The meters now being installed are second generation or SMETS2 smart meters. They can switch seamlessly between energy suppliers, no matter who completed the installation. For those of us like me who have first generation meters in their homes, those are actually being moved across to this new system as well. It's an over-the-air upgrade that the energy suppliers are doing. It's not something that you as a consumer need to worry about. They're all being done. There's already 6 million of them already transferred so that they can switch seamlessly between suppliers, and the rest are being done as we speak and carrying on over the coming years. And I know Citizens Advice have actually got a website as well where you can check to see where your meter is within that process too. So in terms of what happens in a smart meter installation, so to get a smart meter fitted, basically you need to contact your energy supplier. The person who is named on the bill, so the bill payer, needs to do that. They need to contact their energy supplier and organise a date and a time that is convenient for them. The installation itself takes around 2 hours, and someone who's responsible party, needs to be present during the installation. That's to make sure that the installer's got clear access to the meter and the meter cupboard, because quite often installers turn up and actually there's been a cupboard built over the meter, or there's so much stuff in front of it they can't actually get to it. So need to make sure that that access is clear. And also as part of that installation, the engineer will also need to shut off the electricity and gas for a short period of time whilst the meters themselves are replaced. The traditional meters that we have are removed and they're replaced by a smart meter. And smart meters are similar in size to traditional meters, and they're usually installed in exactly the same place that the original meter was. Then, after restoring the gas and the electricity supply to the property, the engineer then carries out some safety checks and also demonstrates how to use the smart metering system, including the in-home display, so the screen that shows you sort of the pounds and pence. And they should be talking about energy efficiency advice as well. That's quite a lot to pack in within the 2 hours. And as we've already mentioned, I think that's really important that people do actually understand what their smart meter is doing and how it works. So it's a critical point that the energy suppliers need to deliver. So in thinking about the key benefits then for landlords, letting agents and tenants, the accurate and automatic readings that the smart meter sends to the energy supplier means that the final bill at the change of tenancy can be calculated accurately, hopefully preventing disputes. And where meter readings are sent to the supplier daily or half hourly, the landlord or letting agents don't need to attend the property to take a meter reading at the end of the tenancy. And you can also monitor sort of usage during any void periods as well. So you can see, has something been left on in the house, or is something not behaving as it should, or is the heating not on? So as we go into winter, actually you need the heating on a bit to make sure your pipes don't freeze. So you can also monitor those as well. Smart meters offer consumers more ways to pay for energy and access to sort of new tariffs and new services as well. We've already mentioned, smart meters can switch between prepayment and credit mode at the bill payer's request. So that means you don't have to have a new meter installed if you go to prepayment either. And smart meters can also provide access to sort of new tariffs. So there are things called time of use tariffs coming out now. More and more suppliers are offering them, whereby if you can switch your energy use so that you're not necessarily using as much energy at peak times, if you can say, for example, be putting your washing machine on a bit later or during the day rather than at that sort of peak tea time period, you can actually benefit from lower tariffs, lower use. And that's part of actually shifting our usage away from peak times, supporting the energy system as a whole, and supporting us in terms of using renewables as well. So as we've heard mentioned before, the visibility that smart meters provide to tenants as well can help them sort of understand their energy far better, help them to think about actually how they're using their energy. Can they use it in a different way? Can they become more efficient in the ways that they're doing that? And our research shows that with that sort of extra information, people do make more informed choices around how they're using their energy at home. We know that sort of 62% of people are more conscious of the energy they use with a smart meter, and 58% of people think twice about using high energy appliances as well. So again, it gives you the information, it gives you the visibility to understand things. And we know that people with smart meters also are more likely to understand their energy bill as well, which is key to all of that. So you know, we've talked about the benefits of smart meters, and you've heard all the panel talking about the benefits of smart meters this morning as well. So if that is the case, why is it that only 36% of private renters have had a smart meter installed, sort of compared to as an average of about 45% of GB adults? So despite private renters having, you know, traditionally having a higher level of interest, why are they not getting one? So to look at this, we commissioned some research by an organisation called the Behavioural Architects to sort of understand possible barriers to smart meter installations in the private renter sector, and to better understand the attitudes of landlords and letting agents as well towards smart meters. We spoke to over 900 landlords and letting agents, and whilst we weren't sure what to expect from the research, the results were actually far more positive than we expected. We first asked landlords whether they'd agree to a request from a tenant to install a smart meter. And really positively, 72% of landlords would agree to getting a smart meter. And we asked then how many landlords had actually received a request and how many had rejected that request as well. And of around 900 landlords, 119 had received a request to install a smart meter, and only 15 of those had been rejected. And then finally, we asked how many landlords had requested a smart meter installation themselves for their rental property, and 25% said that they had. The research also uncovered that if the landlord or letting agent isn't the bill payer, that can really impact on the opportunity to install a smart meter. You know, we'd initially as an organisation thought that maybe void periods between tenancies might be a good opportunity for the landlord to become the bill payer and request an installation. However, from our research, you know, we found that nearly 80% of void periods are 4 weeks or less, and only 25% of landlords become bill payer during that time. So that's far more challenging then for a landlord to actually, if they're not normally the bill payer, it's far more challenging then to request an installation. Our research also found that there was some confusion about the responsibility over smart meter installation as well. So opinion is a bit split over whose responsibility it is to install a smart meter in a rental property, with sort of 38% of letting agents think that it's the responsibility of the landlord, with 51% thinking it's the responsibility of the tenant. Similarly, 40% of landlords believe it's their responsibility, whilst 39% believe it's the tenant's. So just to be clear, as we've been saying, it's whoever's name is on the bill. It's the bill payer who can request that smart meter from their energy supplier. So finally, our research identified how many letting agents included a clause in tenancy agreements preventing a change in energy meters or requiring the consent of the landlord to change the meter. And at least 49% of letting agents include that clause in their model tenancy agreements, which could in itself be a barrier for tenants in installing a smart meter. Because to be honest, if you've got to go to your landlord, well, it might create additional hassle for the tenant, and it might also infer that the landlord doesn't want a smart meter installation. Whereas as our figures have shown, actually, majority of landlords are quite happy to have a smart meter fitted in their property as well. So what actions do we think that letting agents can do, and why are we holding this session today? One of the key things we're looking at the minute is to ask letting agents to remove clauses in tenancy agreements that require the consent of the landlord for a smart meter installation to go ahead. As we've said, because the energy meters are the responsibility of the energy supplier, it is the bill payer's right to request a smart meter installation. We'd also ask letting agents to advise landlords on why smart meters could be helpful in managing the property and how to go about installing one. And refer tenants to our resources as well at the beginning of the tenancy to help them understand the benefits of installing a smart meter. So in terms of helping you with that as well, we've created a dedicated web page with brand new downloadable resources on our website for both landlords and letting agents, as well as one for tenants. We're working closely with letting agent and landlord associations and bodies to raise awareness of specifically around the sort of whose responsibility it is to get a smart meter, the benefits of upgrading and how to get one installed. We're launching a new PR campaign for the private rented sector at the beginning of December. We're also attending conferences and getting out and about and making sure we're speaking to people as well. And as we mentioned earlier, if you are interested in doing some PR yourselves, interested in supporting this avenue, then we're more than happy to support you with that. We can give you some text for a press release as well. Please pop your names and contact details into the chats if you're interested in that. And then finally, we've got, we're here to answer any questions that you may have, and we're happy to sort of speak to your organisations as well. And you can contact us via email at inquiries@smartenergygb.org if you need any help at all. Okay, that was a bit of a sort of whistle-stop run through around the benefits of smart meters and what we need to do. What I'm now going to do is to turn to the panel to have a chat about some of the things that came up in that presentation. Please, as I say, feel free to put any questions that you've got into the Q&A box as well, and we'll pick those up as we go along. But to start then with the panel, and I think Julie, I think you're joining us as well for this panel. Julie, also from the Property Redress Scheme as well. So if I can maybe turn to Kate first. Why do you think that private renters are less likely to request a smart meter installation?
I think, unfortunately, there is so much kind of landlord bashing that says if you dare ask your landlord for anything, be it a pet, smart meter, whatever it might be, then they'll just evict you, because that's what evil landlords do. And letting agents sadly don't go far behind that. And as a result, when you actually look, and I mean, we've got Sean and Julie and Daryl on the call, they know that the majority of landlords and letting agents have a fantastic relationship with their tenants. But I think there is so much fear placed on tenants of making any request that might rock the boat, and that might mean they get kicked out. And actually it happens very rarely. Again, I know that if you rent, if only we told tenants, if you rent from a good letting agent that's qualified, the chance of you being evicted is less than 5%. But that never comes out in the rhetoric. So for me, I think sadly, there's no news story in telling everybody that landlords and tenants and letting agents have great relationships. It's just about when it goes wrong. And there is a real agenda of putting fear into tenants, which I think sadly makes them far less likely to request things. And I think it's quite detrimental. But as I know, we all know there's rogue landlords out there, as there are letting agents, but the majority of them really good. And the majority of them, if tenants could spend 5 or 10 minutes just checking a property before they go in, has it got the EPC, have they got gas safety, have they even got a smart meter, then actually you could riddle out very quickly who the bad landlords and letting agents are. It's just we don't have those conversations enough. So I'm really sorry to say that I think tenants just have the fear of God put into them on such a regular basis that they're not encouraged to ask. And I think this is great, because we have a chance between us all to change that conversation just through something as simple as fitting a smart meter.
Thank you, Kate. I mean, that's raised a whole host of sort of of issues there.
That's me.
Colin, can I turn to you from sort of citizens' advice perspective then? Because obviously you're advising both probably landlords and tenants around this as well. Is there anything coming through sort of your work as well that's showing why private renters are less likely to request a smart meter?
Yeah, and I think there are several factors, and Kate, I think, put her finger on several of them. I guess a couple of additional ones I'd add is just more broadly, renters are somewhat less engaged with energy generally. So we see lower switching rates among the rented sector. Also, the fact that there tend to be shorter occupancy lengths. So they're kind of less likely to be invested in making changes if they think they're only going to be in a property for a short period of time. There is also this factor that's been brought up already, where because it feels like a change to the material of the property itself, I think people do tend to just think of that, well, that must be the landlord's thing. That's one of the things. And we talked earlier in your presentation about clauses in contracts saying, don't change the meter, which, as I understand it, and others who are more expert might be able to correct me, is probably a holdover from the kind of standard meter era where prepayment and credit meters are different meters, and landlords might not want you messing around between credit and prepayment for various reasons. And it wasn't really written thinking about smart meters, which can do both anyway. But when a tenant is just reading that at a glance, that's what they see. And I do think, actually thinking about the contacts we see, I think Kate's point around that kind of the fear of landlords is a factor, because we do get people calling us saying, I quite want a smart meter, but I don't want to hassle my landlord. We do get some saying, I quite want a smart meter. My landlord said no. What can I do? Because I want that smart tariff over there, but I can't get it. So I think all of those kind of create a perfect storm, if you like, of reasons why you don't see quite as much engagement in the private rented sector. But I do think that confusion about who's responsible point that came out so clearly in research is a really crucial one, because so many people are just kind of thinking, well, can I make that choice? Do I make that choice? How does that work? I think that's another key one.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And so thinking about that then, maybe Sean and Julie, in terms of sort of, why do you think there's so much confusion about the responsibility there? Because it's, we know as if you're moving in as a tenant, you quite often will take on that bill and your name will be on that bill. Why is that confusion there for responsibility around smart meter installation?
I think the key here really is the tenancy agreement. The tenancy agreement clauses are very much the tenant can't do this, the tenant can't do that without written permission from the landlord. And those clauses are quite antiquated for society today. And it is just literally because people rely on the professionalism of letting agents to bring them that contract of what they can and can't do as tenants. And when it's written in, in blood, so to speak, and the tenants rely on that legally binding contract, they believe that they don't have the right or the responsibility to change the meters or even sometimes the suppliers that they're using. So I think it goes back to, just genuinely helping the tenants, letting agents and landlords understand who is legally responsible. Yes, the tenant's name is on the bill, but until we start changing clauses in our tenancy agreements, I think we'll always have that confusion there of who's actually responsible.
Yeah, I agree with that, and also the sector is very complex. It's not a single sector. So you have students, and you have HMOs where you have multiple people maybe on a bill, and I think the whole thing is very, very confusing for a tenant. And if you're only there for say you're a student, you're only there for for the academic year, going through and changing those bills, to a smart meter isn't necessarily going to be high on your priority list. Going down the pub and enjoying yourself probably is higher on that criteria. And HMOs, I mean, I'll defer to somebody else on the panel, but I don't know if it's part of licensing requirements to have smart meters installed. That might be an idea, that if you've got to have fire regulations and everything else there, but nothing about energy as far as I can see on licensing. So there is some more challenges that we need to do, especially in in certain sectors of the renting environment.
And as someone whose son has just gone to university, I will absolutely concur that going to the pub is, far higher up the agenda, sadly, than thinking about the energy bills. Although I can see absolute benefits for, particularly in where you've got a group of students together, actually being able to understand their energy and work out how they're paying for that energy. I think it is really important. Daryl, if I turn to you then, so we've kind of touched on this with Sean already, actually. Do you think smart meters should be required by law in private rented properties? And if you do, sort of what incentives or disincentives do you think landlords would respond to around that?
I think that's a difficult one, because I'm a firm believer, for personal point of view, that a person should be able to do with their property whatever they like within reason. And you're asking people just because they're renting it out, they might only be renting out for a short period, to put smart meters in. I can see the benefit, and I can see the benefit of smart meters on being the way forward. But making it mandatory as another lettings perspective, I think, I can see we just probably antagonise more landlords. But again, it goes all back to awareness raising and the benefits of the of smart meters and what they do. And I think, as Colin mentioned, it probably goes back to the stigma of prepaid and credit ones, where a landlord thinks they're getting a big chunky, put a 50 pence in, and then that's the meter that they're going to be left with. So I think as we can do a bit more awareness raising, I think that would help. Putting it mandatory to legislation change for lettings, I think that I don't think that would go down too well. But I think giving people the choice and making them more aware is probably the much better option.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I can see Colin's got his hand up as well. Colin, come in there.
It was just to support that, really. And actually, I think with mandation, we're a little bit wary of that, of mandatory smart meters, both in either market. Because I think the point about landlords might potentially react negatively to it, of being kind of forced into it. It's the same for consumers as well, we've seen. So I just think there is a risk of it increasing resistance when people feel it's being done to them rather than something they're making a choice about. I think from our view, the better approach at the moment is to overcome the kind of information and perception misconceptions and then sell people on the benefits and convince them of it, rather than just saying this is a thing you have to do. There is one side point that's probably worth making around smart meters specifically, where beyond making them mandatory, there is a world where they're not really making any of the old meters anymore. And so whenever a meter exchange happens, it's in almost all circumstances going to be a smart meter. And there are other levers coming in, kind of some by design and some just by the way the market's changing, where if you'd like a time of use tariff, you're going to need a smart meter. Increasingly, if you've got an EV and you want a tariff that works with your EV and charges it up, that's going to need a smart meter. If you want, and actually a lot of suppliers now are also just doing tariffs where the cheapest one, you have to at least agree to get a smart meter to get the tariff. Sometimes there might be a technical issue that stops you getting it, you still get the tariff then. But I think those kind of measures feel like they're going to happen organically anyway. I have a feeling that coming in and just saying, no, it's a legal requirement, especially at this stage, I think might be less helpful than you might initially think for getting them onto walls.
Kate? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it is the awareness side of things. I mean, I've learned loads since we started working together last March that I had no idea about. I've got my smart meter, so I'm learning more about that. But also, you only have to look at the chat and it's happening already. So today we've got how many, 7 or 8 letting agents saying, yes, please send us your PR material and we'll get this out. We're already going to be, thanks to them, we're going to be reaching tens of thousands of people to raise the awareness and to do the encouragement. And I think that's the job that needs done. So to be fair to yourselves, and thanks to the letting agents on board today, and that will encourage everybody else to do it. This is a wonderful market. If one agent in the local area starts it off, all the others will follow. I've known that through working here for a long time. So I think this is, I don't think it needs to be mandatory, because I think the wins are so obvious. It's some of the myths that we needed to bust, which hopefully we can do now. But it's also, it just shows that the letting industry is keen to help and keen to do the right thing, which again is not rhetoric. They're always patted on the back for, but clearly that's working.
Fleer, I'd like to thank Kate as well, because for Hamilton Fraser Group, which owns Property Redress Scheme and My Deposits, Kate kindly did a very comprehensive guide on smart meters, which has just gone live on that, and that's going out to all our our database. And Julia herself, who's also an advisor on our HF Assist, she did a special one on smart meters for letting agents as well. So there's a lot of information out there that we can share, and we've got experts like Julie and Kate, doing this sort of stuff, I think, in a language that people can understand as well. That's the important thing.
I mean, that's brilliant, and that is brilliant to hear. I think one of the other points I took from that as well is very much around the fact that the smart meter can do both the prepay and the credit. I think that is actually really important. Maybe we haven't made enough of that yet in some of the communications that we've put out. So I'm certainly from Smart Energy GB's point of view. And by the way, you're all welcome to come and work for us, because you're great as advocates for smart meters, which is really brilliant to hear. So sort of on that topic then, how do you think letting agents can be better supported to have conversations about smart meters with landlords or with tenants as well? As I said, I'm a landlord, I've got a letting agent. I don't, smart meters do not come up unless I mention them, and then I'm met with sort of kind of a blank stare. Julie, maybe I can turn to you here. Is there anything Sean just mentioned that you've been doing some work on this already?
Yeah, I think it's just lack of knowledge, to be honest with you, and understanding what the smart meter can bring to them. You know, letting agents are businesses at the end of the day, and they're always looking for, you know, the next best thing, the best prop tech and everything like that. What is it that smart meters can do for them? I think they need to understand how it can improve their ability to get the meter readings at the end of a tenancy, how it can help with their inventories, their checkout reports, and also just helping them reduce their admin, which is, you know, a horrendous task for letting agents and property managers, you know, and a smart meter can really help with that. And I think it's just helping them understand really just how a smart meter can just help with their business as a whole. And it's understanding that letting agents are looking at it from a business perspective rather than just, you know, it's the tenants that are going to benefit. It's the letting agents that will benefit as well.
Let's not forget not hitting your head or having to go scramble down on your knees to try and find that meter, because that one, and not having to send in my meter readings, that's all I needed to sell me on this. That's all was required.
I'm with you on that. And actually, one of the questions I was going to ask is actually, are there other benefits for letting agents that maybe we're not covering? And the hitting your head definitely is one of them. Is there anything else, Daryl, maybe to bring you in at this point? Is there anything else that you think, actually, are we missing a trick here with letting agents in terms of what it is that we're talking about? And also for the letting agents out there, please, you know, put your questions, put your comments on this in the chat and the Q&A as well.
Again, I don't think so, other than more awareness raising. I've seen a couple of questions on, you know, on responsibility. What happens if it's not a tidy job that's been done, and what's the outcome from that as well. So just making you know, that can happen in any installation or replacement of any device that's been replaced. You touched earlier the consent clause in the tenancy agreement and about removing that. I don't know. I think there's maybe always a requirement just to make the landlord aware by keeping the consent clause in, but the landlord is made aware. To be honest, what happens if the tenant goes ahead with it anyway? As I mentioned at the start, it's an element of betterment. You can't put the old meter back, so it's just, again, how do you know, making sure agents are familiar with that, or if a tenant's gone ahead and done it and then they see that at the end of tenancy, and these nasty deposit schemes, when they do adjudication, are clearly going to say it's betterment there, and they're not going to hold the tenant's deposit as well. I'm glad you're nodding, Sean. I'm glad you're nodding. Yeah, so it's just a bit of awareness raising, and just that it's, you know, if it does go ahead and the tenant has just gone off and gone under their own back, then, you know, the landlord's generally unaware until it's a change of tenancy, and it's, you know, no harm's been done anyway. So yeah, just keep going with the awareness raising message, I think, and that's the best that we can do to kickstart it.
Excellent, thank you. And in sort of the opening remarks of several of you, many of all of us mentioned sort of energy efficiency and net zero, and the need to sort of be driving forward with this. As we know, there's loads of stuff in the media at the minute around carbon emissions, around getting to net zero, around changing our behaviours around this as well. So, do you, as a panel, do you think that sort of energy efficiency and net zero is important to letting agents? Colin, can I come to you on this first?
Sure, yes, I have slightly less insight into exactly what's important to letting agents. I would hope that net zero is important to everyone, but I do understand you've kind of got mixed incentives there, where if you aren't the bill payer, then your interest in reducing the cost of that energy from a purely financial point will be reduced. I do actually think, especially on the net zero tech, we might start to see a bit more upward pressure where a property becomes more desirable for having a smart meter, especially if you start getting tenants who have an EV, for example. So when they're looking around for a rental property, they'll be saying, right, well, I'm going to want to be able to plug my EV in here and use it. Can I get a tariff that lets me charge my EV at cheaper times at night or whatever? If you haven't got a smart meter, they won't be able to get that tariff. So I do think there's going to be some kind of upward push there. I'm trying to keep it kind of market-based rather than the broader principles based of why aiming for net zero is useful anyway. So I think there is something about increasingly, it may well start making properties more desirable to have this. I mean, we've also got things like, you know, meeting a minimum EPC and things like that as those requirements go up. interventions like this are likely to help, especially if you've got microgen and things like that, which again are supported by smart meters. So I think that's that would be my top line thoughts on it, I think.
We're also missing a slight trick here, I'm guessing, in that I don't know how many of the agents on the panel or on the group could actually have a smart meter for their own small business, or large business, whichever it might be. But maybe that's the place to start as well, because I'm guessing, everybody wants to lower their bills, particularly at the moment. So making an inquiry, we often forget landlords have got homes of their own, and then indeed letting agents have got businesses of their own. And if they haven't thought of putting a smart meter into that, yes, we'd love them to get them in for tenants and through their landlords. But actually, there's even the question as to helping letting agents reduce their own utility bills ongoing by fitting a smart meter.
Yeah, and that's really important. And obviously from Smart Energy GB's perspective, we do a lot of work with smaller businesses around sort of awareness and discussion around smart meters as well. So from a small business perspective, the accuracy and the control, again, that they've got around having the data around their energy can be really beneficial. So yeah, absolutely, we'd encourage all of you to get a smart meter fitted. And just very briefly to come back on a point that Daryl made earlier around sort of successful installations and things like that, just to make the point that suppliers are responsible for successful installations, and if they do damage property in any way, they need to make that good. It's a very rare occurrence. We don't get many sort of grumbles about this, but I don't know that other people have heard it. We don't hear much about this happening, but the supplier is responsible for fixing any damage that they might make to a property as well. Just to get back to the net zero thing then, Sean and Julie, is there any way that industry should better support this sort of discussion around net zero with letting agents and landlords then?
I don't know if there's a better way of discussing it with landlords and letting agents, but I think it's, again, approaching them from a business perspective and helping them understand how they can stand out from the crowd, being, the better letting agent in the high street than the ones down the road. And just, I'm sure Colin will get some figures for me off the top of his head if I'm getting it wrong. But I think as a letting agent, you need to be showing a tenant that you're working with them as much as you're working with the landlord. And a smart meter is also a better way of helping a tenant to manage their money. A lot of tenants don't know how to manage their money. And when there's rent arrears, 9 times out of 10, the rent arrears isn't the only problem they've got. They'll have more than one debt. And sometimes it's the one that shouts the loudest is the one that gets paid first. The landlord and letting agent may not be shouting, it may be the energy provider. If they've got a smart meter, they can see how much money they're using. They can go, oh, do you know what, we won't have the lights on tonight, we'll turn that off each time we go through a room, and they can see it, they can manage it better. So I think from a letting agent's point of view, yes, it is about the global economy and how much energy we're using and the carbon footprint and everything. But on an individual level, tenant to tenant, landlord to landlord, I think it's just about managing debt as well. It's about managing your money and understanding how much it costs to live in a property.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, it's a bit carrot and stick as well. I'm sitting on a committee at the moment, at which Propertymark are also on, speaking to the portals about what is material information disclosed on portals up front. And one of the things that letting agents can do is provide information, on the utility suppliers and the energy efficiency, and whether a smart meter is actually installed. And that would be something which they're kind of obliged to do in terms of material information, but it's also as a carrot is something to kind of like really green up their credentials of a different so when a tenant is looking online for a rental property, they're going to look at the rent first, but then if they can see that the property is also environmentally friendly for them and cheap, then it's going to be another factor. So it's kind of a carrot and stick kind of thing there, and that's where the letting agent can come in there, because they have that information and they have access to the portals and advertising.
Thank you. And sort of again picking up on that point then, so in terms of letting agents maybe who have tenants who are vulnerable, on a low income, or sort of in fuel poverty, sort of is there any way that letting agents can provide sort of more support for their tenants on this? And just in that sort of awareness, again, I think often in a variety, whether you're in private rented or not, people are often quite scared of their fuel bills and scared of that debt, and maybe don't take action soon enough. Colin, I don't know if you can come in on this.
Yeah, and sorry, I also just, not to sidetrack from that, I just noticed the question in the chat as well about the tenant having, how easy is it to read, and do they get an indication on prepayment, which I think is also a crucial one around budgeting, because yes, the smart meters do add quite a lot of budgeting tools that people make use of. And yeah, overall, it should help quite a lot with consumers being able to work out what they're using and where they're using. And actually, I would think it would help during a change of tenancy, because one of the things we're keen to see is landlords actually explaining the heating system in a house to people when they come in, so that they know how to heat it appropriately and what to use it, especially when you've got things like storage heaters, which they might not have encountered before, and how those work. And actually having a smart meter will really help with those, because you'll have much stronger sense of where it's going and what it's using too. But yeah, to answer the question in the chat, just because it caught my eye, yes, you do get warnings, and you can actually set budgets within the in-home display. And on the usability with sight impairment, there's something called the accessible in-home display, which I like to take every opportunity to promote, because I spent a long time badgering the industry to create it, which is effective. The clue's in the name. It is more accessible. It's got larger buttons. It's got better screen contrast and text. It does text to speech, and anyone can request that if they want it and if they feel they need it. And at this point, I think all suppliers have those now and should be able to provide one. So if you do have a sight impairment, or indeed a dexterity impairment, something like that, kind of get the bigger buttons and everything else, that support is also available.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left, and I know that the team are answering the sort of the Q&As in the background for us as well. I suppose in the last few minutes, are there any sort of key points or things that you'd like letting agents to really think of in terms of what they can do in helping tenants to get smart meters, or helping themselves to get smart meters? Kate, can I come to you first, just for a few closing points?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm looking at all the chat and I'm seeing all the requests for the PR. I think the job is done as far as everybody on here. And I think really I'd rather do what agents rarely get, is actually say thank you for sparing the time in a busy week. I know what it's like to be with us today. Thank you for taking the time to understand about how smart meters can help. And I think it's fantastic that we've now got agents and, you know, people like the Property Redress Scheme, ALA, etc., to really behind this. And I'm confident that this time next year, you'll be pretty amazed at Smart Energy, at what an amazing job the private rented sector have done at supporting installation of smart meters. So I think we're doing what we need to do. And I think the big ask is we're letting agents and get behind us and the industry. And I think you've had your answer, which is an absolute yes.
That's a lovely positive note. Thank you, Kate. Daryl, I'll let you follow that one up.
I mean, all I'm going to say is I might lead by example, because I don't have a smart meter. But I might look at getting one installed now at my own property. So yeah,
there you go. One more.
One more, so yeah, you can take that away. But yeah, it's just I suppose it's just been a awareness raising exercise for everyone, and say you know you just hit on that landlords are homeowners, agents are businesses, agents are people as well. You know, they've got their own homes as well. So it's just yeah, while this is primarily a letting agent group, yeah, they can lead by example, and I'll say I'll probably do it. I won't fully.
You will.
Come on, I'm gonna chase you, Daryl. I'm gonna chase you.
This isn't getting recorded, is it?
Oh yeah,
it is.
This is very public. Colin, can I come to you next?
Sure, and I'm kind of bookending mine from my opening comments, but I guess I would first emphasize kind of how important this work is for us when we just look at the numbers of where smart meters are. Because I talked at the start about the benefits, especially for those on prepayment. And making sure that people get them. We're always interested in that kind of distributional impact, and is anyone getting left behind? Is anyone missing out? And there is that gap that we identified in the private rented sector, where I think anything, and this kind of event I think has been really helpful, that helps increase that. And a lot of it is, as people have said, it's about awareness, it's about understanding, it's about addressing questions like the ones in the chat that we're seeing. So I think all steps towards that are very positive, and we're very keen to see it. And I think, to be honest, the fewer calls we get from people saying, can I get one? What's the situation? Am I allowed one? Or indeed, you know, my landlord said no. Well, any reduction in those is always a benefit. I do think there's one element that didn't really get touched on. Kate's talked a lot about how, you know, the majority of landlords are very good and reasonable. There is that kind of branding issue where a handful of poorly behaving landlords who, to be honest, are not the kind of landlords who will call into this or who will necessarily engage with research, they can kind of poison the well is probably too dramatic a term, but they can harm that as well. But it kind of causes this. It's very striking to me when I talk to consumers and people at the kind of that receiving end of it, how quickly one person's bad experience becomes a story they share around of saying, oh, well, landlords don't let you, oh, landlords don't like them. And it kind of becomes a meme, for want of a better word, among people. And that starts spreading. And then we get the calls saying, well, is that right? Can I make the choice? So I think work like this is super important, and it makes me feel more optimistic. So I appreciate that vibe.
Thank you, Colin. And then Julie and Sean as a double act.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still gonna, harp on about what I said about using it as a marketing tool, making you stand out against the other agents in the high street, and just educate yourselves on the smart meters themselves, and using it as a selling tool. If you've got a property on the market and so have 3 other agents, just make yourself stand out a little bit more, but also understanding exactly what Kate said. It will help you not have to get into those dark, gloomy little cupboards with your torch on your smartphone trying to find the flipping meter readings and lofts and God knows where else we've got to go. But it will reduce your admin, and that's a key thing for any property manager. I was a property manager for 20 years, so I know the admin out there. Don't worry. Anything we can do to reduce that, but it's just educate yourself on smart meters. They're a fantastic tool for you as agents, for the landlords, and specifically for the tenants.
And I'll just add that there's a fantastic charity out there called Agent Giving, and one of the things that they could be doing, or we could be doing as letting agents, is fuel poverty, and maybe getting on board in helping people with fuel poverty, which is a growing thing and will grow because bills are going to go astronomical with what's going on at the moment. So a lot of agents out there I know who are listening to us are already involved in that, but maybe a little campaign on fuel poverty, in which smart meters would be part of it.
Excellent. Thank you to all of the panel. I think your contribution today has been brilliant. It's been a really good discussion, and I hope all of you listening have enjoyed this. As I said earlier, there is plenty more information on our website at smartenergygb.org, and please contact us if you've got any queries, any questions you've got following this, or you want some more information, then please don't hesitate to contact us. We are sending additional materials to all those who've requested it, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you.
Thanks all.